Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. Thieleke's art roots go back to her childhood, where two of her art teachers planted the seeds not only of the importance of art, but also of what kind of person she wanted to be. She's been actively making and sharing art ever since, even though her path to school teaching took a few detours. Tara tells us about those two teachers, what she's learned from her students, how she applies improv's yes and mantra to her teaching and her life, and more. Here's my conversation with Thieleke. Tara, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to hear your story today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, how did your creative journey start? Were you always a creative kid, or did you come to it later in life?
I think I was always interested in creative things. I definitely, was given crayons to be kept quiet at restaurants, and that worked for me. And I want to say in first grade or so, I won an art contest, and that did really make me feel very special. I didn't win. I think I got second, but that was still a, big win for me. And I just had some really important art teachers along the way. I had an important one, I think, in fifth grade for a year, and especially my high school art teacher. And, I always loved it as a hobby, but I think my high school art teacher really made me, believe it was something that I could really kind of pursue the rest of my life. So
I'm curious to hear more about those two teachers.
Well, the teacher that I had in fifth grade, Miss Van Cleve, and I'm trying to find her somewhere in the world. She's not on Facebook that I can tell. I didn't have her from very long, but she had so much personality. I was actually a little intimidated by her because she was kind of loud and proud, the way she just kind of walked around the room, but she was really fun. And I just liked her activities. And I think one of the things that that probably the biggest thing that she did for me, but she did even more interesting things for other people. But when she was leaving at the end of, in the spring, she knew she was going to move to California or something like that. And she'd called me up to her desk and she said, I'm moving to California and I can't take all my art supplies with me. And she said, I thought you might be somebody that would be interested in some of them. And I was like, oh, yes, I'd love some. And she gave me puffy paint. It was the 80s, fluorescent puffy paint. And I can't even remember all the other things, but I got, maybe a shoebox full of art supplies, and I was very excited about it. And I went home, and I remember my mom said, well, you need to make her a little thank you, for the supplies. And from whatever my mom said, we should use this puffy fabric paint as a thank you. My mom got out a brown turtleneck of all things. And I painted what I'm sure is like the ugliest shirt on earth right now. It was a palm tree and with coconuts, but the coconuts were fluorescent orange. I definitely remember that was probably a fluorescent highlighter green, for the palm tree on a brown turtleneck that was surely from the 70s. And anyway, but that was my thank you to her. And bless this woman, she wore that shirt the next day to school. And and I was very proud of this. I think she made me feel special, and that this was exciting and fun. And she did that for me. But I found out a few things about her a few years later that always stuck with me too. And I didn't really find this out until she had moved away for 2 or 3 years. But a good friend of mine, her brother was blind, and he was in her class. He was in 8th grade when I was in 5th grade, and she had put like salt and different textures in the paint because he was not born blind. He remembered colors from when he was a toddler. Wow. And so he could, he knew the sky was supposed to be blue or the grass was green, things like that. And so she had done, she'd gone just above and beyond to give him like a visual art experience, which I just thought was really amazing. And then rumor was that she ended up working for an art school for the blind in California. But this is all, I've tried to find her and I don't know what her story is. But just, I think knowing those things about her just kind of stuck with me. And then I had just an absolutely phenomenal art teacher in high school, Daniel Weiss, a really big mentor for me. I had him my sophomore, junior, and senior year. I think my senior year, I didn't need too many more credits to graduate. And I think I signed up for 5 classes my spring semester, my senior year. And then of course he got a student teacher. But but he was in the room, so he was still there. But, I could go on about Daniel Weiss. I think the reason he was, it's hard to really put a finger on all the reasons he was so special, but I think he really was the person in my life that cared more about everything than anybody I had ever met before. He cared about the tone that he used with people when he spoke to them. He cared about the consequences of his actions. He cared about the quality of his work. I'd never really just seen someone invest so much effort into just every little aspect of their life. And I just admired that a lot. And he kind of allowed me to embrace perfectionism, but in a healthy way, I think, just to give my best, and just to be very thoughtful, as much as I could be in the time that I was given. And he was just an important mentor. I mean, I had great parents, but he was just one of those people that filled in all the gaps that you just inevitably have. When you're growing up, you just can't get everything from just 2 people. Mm-hmm. You get things from a lot of people, and he filled in some of those biggest gaps, I think, for me, and set me on a good path. And then I think he really made me, more than anything, probably just love learning, period.
He sounds pretty phenomenal.
He was.
Yeah. I mean, most of us don't think about a lot of those things that you listed. So to watch somebody do that, especially, for an entire year, that's an amazing, amazing gift, really.
He was very theatrical in his teaching, but he was also very genuine at the same time. And he was just a very memorable person, just, really unique. And I'm really teach nothing like him myself. I think in spirit, I have a lot in common with him, but eventually I kind of had to find my own way. But I do think the core principles and things that he believed in, I do really try to emulate the things that he did, as much as possible. So
did he inspire you to become a teacher, or did that happen?
A teacher
else?
And an artist. He was an art teacher and I'm an art teacher. So I think first and foremost, he just got me interested in art, and he made me believe that art was worthwhile. I think before that, I had just sort of thought art was a fun hobby, makes things prettier, more interesting. But I think I had in my mind that there were other more noble things that a person could do with their life, like maybe being a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, or I don't know. I sort of thought that there were probably things that were, more important. And he really kind of made me realize that art is kind of what we live for, music is, a big thing, but, visual art makes the world more beautiful, more interesting. Music just, is, soothing, relaxing, fun. Film, everything that we do when we just decide to relax, whether it's watch a movie, whether it's travel, whether it's read a book, all of those things are really art. And it was like everything else is like a means to get to an art experience, I think. And he just made me realize that it was actually really important, and that I wasn't abandoning other important things to make this important. So I think he made me, first kind of fall in love with art and the benefits of making art and having art in spaces. I think that, but it was also the way that somehow through art, he taught me about everything else. I think he gave me a moral compass, and I struggled with reading when I was in high school. I could read, but I probably had ADHD. I was never officially diagnosed, but it was probably more of a concentration thing than anything. But I really didn't read well. He was the reason I was like, I've got to get good at reading. He's just made it clear to me that there's just too much good stuff in books. And nobody had ever really done that for me. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain that, but it really, and so he made me kind of overcome obstacles that were really pretty big obstacles for me. And And, I mean, obviously getting better at reading and writing opened a lot of doors for me as well. And so, yeah, I think it was that, but it was the way he just kind of poured all of his energy into everything he did. But, I think it was the way he spoke about people too. I remember him talking about his children and his wife, long before I met them. And one day they came into school and, just mom came in and the kids were pretty small and they were just playful. And, the way he had talked about his wife was, I mean, he had kind of put her on this pedestal, like she was some kind of goddess that was this brilliant genius and all stuff. And I don't know what I expected to see when she came in, and no offense to her, but she was, just another ordinary person like all of us. And I realized it was him that kind of bestowed that grandeur on the people. He recognized their inner beauty and their brilliance, and he really believed in it. And he kind of bestowed that gift on everyone that he knew and sort of highlighted it and brought that out in people. And I just really loved how he did that, because I think everybody that knew him felt special, felt loved, felt paid attention to, and then also started to do the same for everyone in their lives. And I mean, when I went to his funeral, I mean, it was jam packed. And I mean, almost every student that spoke at the funeral he was like a father to me, over and over again. And I felt the same way. And I thought this is just so magnificent that he managed to be able to do that to so many people. I don't know how he had any time left for himself. And he probably really didn't. He probably really made a lot of sacrifices to do that for people. But, he really he had a gift with people, and it was all of the things. He made me love human creations, and then how he treated people. And I realized I wanted to do those things too with my life, whatever I pursued. And after a while, I thought, I feel like I don't even know how to do it any other way, but the same way he did it as an art teacher. And it took me a while, because I was absolutely sure that I would never be anything like him. And I'm still not. I remember I had been teaching, I mean, now I've been teaching 20 some years, but this was only like 6 or 7 years ago. And I just had a really good lesson. I mean, I don't know why everything came together. The kids were engaged and kind of just felt like my words came together well. And at the end of the lesson, I thought, oh my gosh, I just had my first class as good as Mr. Weiss's. And I had been teaching, I'd been teaching for 13 to 15 years at this point, but I was like, I think I just had a Weiss moment. That's really how I felt about it. And then I started to just kind of feel like I had more moments that were, maybe not like his or anything like that. But I was like, that was a really valuable moment. That went well. I need to do that again, and things like that. But I was definitely afraid of teaching for a long time, because I just knew that I would not be as effective as him. And I wasn't for a long time. But as I've honed my craft, and sometimes I'm effective now. So
I'm sure it's more than sometimes.
Sometimes even more than once in a week. But yes. Well, I wonder now. I wish I could, talk to him again. And as a more experienced teacher, I would love to know what. I'm sure he had insecurities all the way through his career, too. But it'd be interesting to have a discussion with him again as a much older person.
Yeah. And he'd probably be thrilled to hear what you've done.
He would. He was supportive when I became a teacher. And in fact, I will say though, some of my very first assignments, I actually kind of submitted to him for his approval, and he had so many criticisms. He was so critical. And I totally took that advice though. I really did. I mean, it hurt a little bit, but I did. I definitely read everything that he said. And I do keep in touch a little bit with some of his siblings and things like that. And occasionally we just, through social media and things like that. And that's fun for me to at least keep in touch with his siblings, because he was just a really special person,
That's abundantly clear. It's amazing. Really amazing. So is that when you decided that you wanted to teach, or did it take a little while?
Well, I think I did right at the beginning college decide to like, study an art education. Um, but then I kind of backed away from it and I stayed in all visual arts fields. I think for a minute I was like a printmaking major. I think I finished with a studio art degree, which actually did not leave me certified to teach. Um, and then I got married and had a child at pretty young, like 23. And so I ended up kind of like, well, I had three children, but by the time I was 29, and I sort of stayed home with the kids, and I kind of worked little small odd jobs, and a lot of it would be like kind of preschool or elementary school, after school programs, and I would do arts and crafts and things like that. So I never really left it, but I was kind of just staying, what I would say is on the outside periphery of that kind of career. I was in touch with, kids, and I was doing art. But I wasn't, only maybe 6 to 10 hours a week or something like that. And then when the kids were elementary age, I started teaching elementary art, and then I did middle school, and then now I'm in high school. It was I didn't get certified until I was teaching middle school. I actually worked at a private school for a while because I wasn't certified. But yeah, I never got, I think I was just always kind of dipping my toe in the water. It's like, I kind of knew that this was sort of what I was supposed to be doing, but a little afraid. And then I think busyness with life and kids kind of was a good excuse to not focus on it for a while. But then eventually, it's always kind of probably been my path, I think. I mean, I really would have a hard time. I don't know what else I would do. I mean, I love the environment. Maybe I could go pick up trash on a beach somewhere. I just really don't know what other jobs I could do. It's definitely the most natural one for me. So.
Well, I think that's true for a lot of us, and it's just a question of how long it takes us to figure out what that path is and how long we avoid it. So
yeah.
So
avoiding it, or sort of watching it and observing it, and I don't know, I feel like I just creeped into it. And I meet so many teachers now that they're my age and they're on their 25th year, towards retirement. But because I spent time in private schools and things like that, I'm like, I'm on year 7. I'll be here till I'm 65, no matter what.
Yeah.
But I'm glad. I'm a busybody, and I think until I feel a little bit maybe out of touch with just maybe modern times or technology, I'll probably keep doing it. That I think that I am kind of cognizant that there is a time where you are a generation removed from maybe the kids, and that would be a better time to maybe be in administration and not teaching or something. But as long as I feel like I can still kind of connect with the kids, I'll probably be in the classroom. So,
well, and I think the interesting thing about a statement like that is that I think the longer you're in the classroom, the longer you connect with the kids. So
it's been true for me.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I always have found that I have learned at least as much from my students as I suspect they have learned from me.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to know what kinds of things you've learned from your students over the years.
Well, first of all, Mr. Weiss used to say that all the time. What have I learned from my students? Well, that's just, there's probably way too many things to list. I think the first thing I've learned is that how I treat them is way more important than what I treat them or what I teach them, how I teach them versus what I teach them. So it's first kind of showing them that you really do care about their future, and you're not just putting information in front of them because you're getting a paycheck for it. And so it really matters more that we kind of have positive relationships and positive experiences before we do anything else. So definitely learned that, because any kind of missteps I've made where I've been hurtful, anything like that, they've just interfered with our ability to move forward, for sure. And you have to, if anytime you make a misstep, which is going to happen, you're going to be cranky someday, things aren't going to come out right or whatever. You got to repair that. You got to repair that before you can even do anything. so one thing I say a lot to the kids, because if they're rude to me or if I'm rude to them, we just pause and I say to them, more important than our ability to read or count or anything is our ability to be, kind and to each other. And, I say to them too, no one's going to pay you to be disrespectful to them. I mean, they can train you on whatever they need you to do for their job. But they need you to be, kind to them, kind to their customers, kind to the fellow employees. And we need to be in the habit of it, and it needs to be a reliable skill that we have. So, anytime we do that, we just kind of stop and talk about that, because I just don't think we can go forward until we have that. So that's I learned that from just watching the way I treated people, how it affected people. What else have the kids taught me? They just constantly give me creative ideas and new possibilities. I think they're big problem solvers, and maybe not even intentionally. Sometimes you give them a set of tasks to do, and they do it a lot of different ways than you expected them to do it. And usually after I've given an assignment, they've come up with 10 new ways to do something that I didn't even consider. And I'm grabbing their example and say, oh, look what so-and-so came up with. I hadn't even considered this. This is a great solution to this problem. This is a great method, things like that. So I think they're just constantly showing me the many possibilities, the many ways we can be successful all the time. So I think those are probably the two biggest things. I'm sure there's a lot more. I feel like I learn little fun, silly facts from them all the time, every day. I have a group of girls that ask me a question of the day every day. And we learn some of the most random things about each other. I think the most recent question they asked me was, would I go to a Pitbull concert for $40? And I decided I thought I would. I said I needed a friend to go with me, but we just have some really fun conversations, and it spills into what a good price is for a concert. Who's Pitbull's audience is, just silly stuff. But I think it really kind of grows into other things, because I chaperoned homecoming last night, and my question of the day girls wanted to show me their dresses and things like that. And I had a not very fun job of kind of policing this area where they were trying to make sure no kids left and no new kids came in or tried to go to their car and come back. And I had to speak to some kids right at that moment, but because those girls were there, they were like, oh no, she's just doing her job. Like they kept it from being, getting escalating and things like that. Wow. And so I was happy for them last night too.
That's cool though. That's the kind of relationship with students that I always really loved, when it's like, it's not just, here are things that I am supposed to teach you, and you are supposed to show me that you have learned them, and that's it.
Yes.
Those are the magic little pieces that keep you going, I think.
Oh, for sure. For sure. That's the rewarding part of teaching, for sure.
Yeah. Just thinking about how much effort they must put into coming up with their question every day. And, because that's a whole thing. If it's an everyday thing, that's a commitment.
It is 4 girls, and 2 of them are bigger question askers than the other 2. But yeah, no, I think it comes pretty naturally to them. They seem to, I don't want to say they're nosy, but, no, they're curious. They're curious, and they're fun, and they definitely are great at starting fun conversations. We even have another series of questions that is blank or blank. So one of the questions was, if you could only wear one color the rest of your life, would it be red or blue? We have a lot of those. So some of them are, I don't think we put too much effort. And if they really can't come up with a question, then I ask them a question. So I need to work on one. I need to have one in my pocket ready to go for the next time. So, and sometimes we have to think about one time we were like, if you couldn't live in the United States, which country would you choose? And I think we all needed like 3 days for that one for some reason. we were like, I'm going to get back to you. I've narrowed it down to these places. But yeah, none of us could make that decision quickly, I guess.
Wow. Wow.
So what did you teach?
I taught English as a second language.
Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's been kind of a little bit of a theme for me this year. I have a lot of Latinx students, and I kind of just hit my ceiling. I studied French in high school. I studied German in college, and I'm really regretting not studying Spanish, of course, because I have maybe anywhere from 5 to 10% of my students in each class speak Spanish. And I just decided this year, I was like, that's it. I'm teaching myself Spanish. I'm going to get fluent. It might take me a while. I'm playing that Duolingo game. I don't know if you've ever played Duolingo. I play it pretty religiously, and I'm learning quite a bit from it, and it's been pretty helpful. But I got a student from Honduras maybe 2 months ago, and she had never ever heard English the day that she arrived. She'd gotten separated from her family. Oof. And I don't know the specifics because she couldn't even tell me the specifics if she wanted to. And she's been here about 2 months, and she's definitely picked up a lot already. But it was a rough day. They had given her really hard classes like physics. And I mean, I can't remember. They even gave her a schedule where she had to leave my school and ride a bus to another school. And of course she missed the bus because I mean, it was like the last thing that she was expecting to have to do. Sure. And, anyway, and at the end of the day, another student of mine that's fluent in Spanish told me that she saw her crying somewhere. And I just was like, I was frustrated that I couldn't even really say a few words of kindness to her. And I just kind of put my energy into rounding up other kids and I said, I'm not really supposed to tell you any of this, but I want you to know this about the student. Will you look out for her? Will you, help her? Will you introduce her to people? And they did, and they were awesome. But that's what spawned it. And I think I probably play a half hour to an hour of Duolingo every day. I've translated every single worksheet into Spanish this year. I'm an art teacher, so my worksheets are very, do the color wheel or something. The directions are pretty easy to translate. It's not like a book or anything. But anyway, that's been really fun this year too. A lot of my students have fun proofreading my poor translations. They are having a blast with that. So I seem to never get the accents or the masculine or feminine stuff right at all, or plurals, let alone conjugating verbs. Forget that. But they have fun making fun of my Spanish, and I've had fun too. I got a little treat from a Mexican grocery store from one of my students that works there as a thank you for that. And now I'm just super motivated about it. And hopefully a year from now, I'll understand a little bit more spoken Spanish and things like that. And then, as a bonus, I can travel more places now and know a little bit more about what's going on. So, yeah. So I'm sure that was really enjoyable for you, teaching them a new language and learning about their cultures as well.
Exactly. I mean, they all came in with a functional level of English, right? But the stuff that they would tell me about, like I found out that my birthday is Taiwanese Independence Day. That's cool.
Interesting.
And once, the Taiwanese students never forgot my birthday once they knew. I mean,
that's awesome.
It was amazing. And, I mean, what's a night market and, all sorts of stuff. It's just,
so were your students primarily from Asia?
Most of them were, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Most of my students are, from Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean. A few are from South America, not very many, but we don't have a big Asian population at my school. So, but it's,
yeah.
I can imagine though, if you just moved to a new school district, you have a whole new set of skills that you'd have to develop.
Well, and these were coming from their home countries every year. So,
so they would return. Okay.
Yeah. And so especially some of them, when they would come in for, orientation at the beginning of the year, we didn't really get any sixth graders, I don't think, but we got a bunch of kids who started when they were in seventh grade, and they were just so tiny. And you look at them and think, boy, I don't know if I could have done this when I was your age, to come over here. And I mean, the fact that the Asian community, and it was particularly Korean and Taiwanese were the largest groups, was so big was both a blessing and a curse, because in terms of learning English, they didn't have to speak it all the time because they would hang out with their friends and speak Korean or Taiwanese or whatever. But, and I would sometimes say that to them, like, our lone Polish student over here is learning a lot more English than you are because he doesn't have a choice.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it meant that they could feel a whole lot less like they had just been dumped somewhere, totally abandoned on their own. And, we would also keep an eye on them and look out for them and make sure that they weren't freaking out every day. And usually it would be right around October would be when all of a sudden it would dawn on them that they had been away from mom and dad for a month and things would happen. But then it would settle back down again. And they were really good about looking out for each other. So yeah, but boy, you'd see some of them come in and you're just like, you are tiny. You're tiny. I can't believe somebody's leaving you here on your own. And yet, they figured it out. So
it's amazing how resilient kids are.
Totally.
I and a lot of my students, if there, a lot of them are really first generation Americans, but some of them are not. And it's usually from south of the United States, it's usually a one-way ticket in and not a trip back. And it's a disconnect from family members, sometimes a permanent one. And that is really hard.
Yeah.
And I only have one student. She's amazing, but she got to go, she has dual citizenship, I guess. And she got to go back to Mexico, and she went by herself it was a 2-day bus ride, to some region in southern Mexico. And it was a 2-day bus ride back, and she did it all by herself. And, she's 16 or 17 years old. And I just thought, I can't even imagine. I wasn't mature enough to do that back then. I, wasn't given any kind of responsibility like that. And she kind of did it for the family. The family kind of needed her to take care of some business in Mexico. And she was really the only person with all the skills needed to do both. And I just thought, wow, I mean, she's really like a pillar for her family on both sides of the border. And I think other students thought it was really fascinating too, because some students, it's like, even if that's their heritage, they don't get to go back and enjoy it. Or if they do, it'll be few and far, very few times in their lifetime. And so, so that was really interesting. I already want her to like write me a whole book about that trip. So I've already asked her too many questions about that, but it seemed really fascinating, and she's wise beyond her years. But yeah, it's just, and you just learn so much about the world through their
so much.
It's like traveling when you're in the classroom, really.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I had two students that they realized that they were both from Jamaica, and they had kind of been sitting on opposite sides of the room. And for whatever reason, I had given them a group activity, and they had ended up together, and they just immediately switched into Creole, and I couldn't understand what they were saying anymore. I was catching bits and pieces, but then it was fun because we just started asking them, their what they thought of Jamaica and their experience in America. And like I said, it was like taking a trip, because, they would say, oh, crime is bad there. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, is it scary to go to the ATM? Do women have equal rights? What, and they would just give me all of their, what their opinion on those questions and stuff. And it was super fascinating to hear, from kids that had been here. And then they also started to tell me funny things about, second generation Jamaican students that can copy their parents' accents, but think they're speaking Creole, but they really can't. and they were just telling me funny things. And they're like, and there was another student in the room that was a first generation Jamaican or American, but his parents were Jamaican, and he did exactly that. He tried to talk to them in Creole, and they said, I said, well, how can you too? And they're like, well, we can just ask him basic questions. I'm like, what does he say when he skips class? They're like, because he won't be able to do it, because that's not something his parents would say in front of him. And so they did it. And ironically, the word for skipping class was skull, which sounds like school to me, but it's more like the word skull, I guess. but that's what they would say and stuff. And they're like, yeah, they said we have little words that we use to just really try to identify if they really lived in Jamaica like we did, or if it was their parents.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were kind of throwing a little shade. They didn't feel like they were as legit if their parents if they were born in the U.S.
Wow, so, that makes sense.
It was cute. It was fun.
So I've had over the last almost 3 years, I've had a couple of guests who have brought up the improv principle of yes and.
Oh.
And I know you're a fan, so I'm
a huge fan.
Make sure that we get a chance to talk about how that influences your work and your life and wherever all it comes into play for you.
Well, I really don't have a lot of theater experience. I did a little in middle school. I think there was an age where had I had really great theater teachers versus really great art teachers, I might have gone in that direction, because as a young person, I really did like that stuff. But we didn't have a theater program in my middle school. And I think that's really kind of what determined my future. But my ex-husband did improv and was the first person to introduce me to Yes And, but also my kids did a lot of, theater, maybe mostly in middle school, a little bit in high school. And so they were also familiar with it. And I think it was just kind of a conversation, with my ex-husband when I was still married, but, he was telling me about it, and he was telling me about the yes and game, and how you're never supposed to negate your partner. Mm-hmm. So basically, a person, if they're starting some kind of improv scene, they suggest something, and even if it's just what you believe is really the most batshit crazy, terrible idea, you just support it like it is the best idea on earth. And I was really fascinated with this, because once he told me the concept and then I were watching the skits, I realized that the funnier skits were the people that were successfully doing this, that were really supporting their partner no matter how the suggestion started. And I was just kind of fascinated with it. And then I think as an art teacher, I get a lot of kids with some really left field ideas. They'll come up to me with, just a very specific idea that's, really unusual. And I'm not quite sure how they can apply it to the criteria that I've given them and things like that. But I've just decided to say yes and every time, no matter what. And I saw as a teacher, I got better art. As long as I immediately respected their ideas and really put my head into how can they build their idea, and just let go of any of my preconceived notions and prejudices and biases or anything, and just be like, I'm just going to act like this is the best idea I've ever heard. Yes, you should put a bra on My Little Pony. That is a great idea. Or just whatever. And I don't know. And it made for a more positive relationship with my students. It made for better art, and also it made for better humor. It made, it really did make it a more pleasant, kind of funny environment. And so whoever came up with this idea, that was just absolutely brilliant. The yes and, I think all people should apply it to their life. I think saying yes when your instinct is to say no really opens you up as a person and gets you to try new things, try bigger, harder things than you thought you would try, gets you to collaborate more with other people and learn from other people. So yes, thank you, improv people, for that gift that you gave to humanity, because I think it is an absolutely brilliant concept, and it's been a pillar of my thinking. Probably almost as important as Mr. Weiss's, but Mr. Weiss was practicing yes and I just didn't know it. I mean, I think he was doing that all along, and even to circle back to our pit bull conversation. So somehow they asked this question. I went home later and realized Pitbull really was coming to concert in Atlanta, and it was not $40, it was $50 or something for a ticket, but it was kind of funny. And I was talking to my daughter, and I asked her the question, would you go see Pitbull for $50 in Atlanta? And she was kind of like, yeah, actually that sounds really fun. And we were kind of joking and really looking into tickets. We didn't buy any, but it was so funny because one of the questions of the day later on ended up being like, Miss Thieleke, what are you doing over the break? And I said, well, Sunday I'm going to the Pitbull concert, you know, and, you know, and it was just silly, but but one of the girls' eyes got really big because clearly she was planning on going. That's all. And she was like, you are? And I was like, I said, no, I'm not going to spoil your fun. I said, I just saw that that he really was coming. And so yeah, the yes, and it's saying yes to other people. It's supporting other people. It's building on their ideas. It grows all of us. I'm glad to hear that you've other creative people do that too. It's fun. And, it also has, I pay attention to that concept when I watch other comedians. I think, I don't know if you've watched Ted Lasso.
I adore Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. Jason Sudeikis is a yes and person. That all those writers are, I feel like they've built on some really wacky ideas. And I see that in their work for sure. And I think Dave Chappelle is also a yes and person. I think his stories are very continuous and long, and they're just continuing to build. And sometimes his story is that whole hour segment and comes right back full circle. And it's great. I would recommend it to anybody that's looking to expand their creativity for sure.
I'm pretty sure, though I would have to go look it up. If I look for it and I find it, I will put it in the show notes. But I'm pretty sure that that's part of how Tina Fey got her, I think it was her Saturday Night Live job, but I could be wrong. It was a job that changed everything for her, was that she was offered it and she decided yes, and even though she had no idea what it was going to look like, where it was going to go,
right?
Probably was scared to death about it. But, you know, I think those folks that, you know, come up through the improv ranks, it does kind of become your philosophy for how to handle life because you're so immersed in it.
Yeah. I don't know Tina Fey's personal story, but I know a lot of people that have ended up at Saturday Night Live have come from Second City in Chicago, which is an improv. And I believe that's where Yes and started. But I could be wrong, but it could be a book that the Second City people adopted or something, but I'm afraid I'm getting those details wrong. But Jason Sudeikis, I think, is also a Second City. I think that, but again, I could be wrong. So don't quote me on that, but I remember reading something about that a while ago, and it's great. Now I will say it does lead to that. Sometimes you can say yes to too much and then you've left yourself a little depleted. But I think there was a woman that wrote a book and she called it The Year of Yes. And she just decided to say yes to everybody that asked her a favor. Yes. And I thought, I haven't read that whole book, but I definitely sat in a bookstore and at least read a chapter of that book and was like, oh yeah. And she just did it for a year. And I think that it will affect her life forever. But at the same time, you know, eventually you do have to say no. But it's better to be saying no out of wisdom and not fear. I think so. It's great to do that. Yes. And, you know, your limitations when it's time to eat and sleep and relax and things like that. But if you say yes and a lot, you'll be doing it you'll be saying no out of wisdom and not out of fear. I think early in your life, you can say no a lot based on fear, and don't ever want people to be making fear-based decisions, you know?
Yeah. And you know, no is often the easy answer, right? You don't really have to think about it.
Right.
Yes can be kind of scary, which immediately puts your brain into, I don't want to think about this mode. And then you just default back to no. But there is something about yes. I mean, I want to say it was just a few years ago, but I'm sure it was more years ago than I care to consider. You know, there's also the movie Yes Man, which is the same kind of thing. You know, you're just going to say yes. And that whole movie, that character has all sorts of adventures that he never would have had because he's saying yes to things. And I can't remember what the premise is, if he has to say yes or why he's doing it, but it doesn't matter. I mean, that whole movie just like it opens up his entire life. And you're right that, you know, you have to know what your limits are. If you're going to do something super dangerous and aren't sure
right.
that it's going to be safe, please don't just randomly say yes. But, a lot of the stuff that, we're confronted with thousands of decisions every day and probably don't even realize how many of them we just dismiss with a quick no and never think about again. And what would happen if we actually just said yes instead?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating how you've seen it play out in art too. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that this is not just a theater tool.
Oh, it should be brought into education, for sure. The only thing is, I think teachers are by and far kind of a selfless group of people that do a lot of unpaid work outside the hours of that, and they are the people that will really say yes, to the edge of exhaustion. And I'm sure, I know they're not the only, I know nurses and a lot of other people will do the same. I'm sure there's many professions that do that, but so I think it's good advice for a young new teacher. And then once they'll get to a point where they've overexerted themselves very quickly, but I do think it should be a part of education. I think especially any of the fine arts, anything to do with creative writing, music, theater. I guess it's a little bit harder maybe to apply to maybe strict mathematical concepts or something like that. But I do think but the relationship wise, that supporting the student and things like that, is good. And it even, to me, it even affected how many times I let kids use the bathroom. I used to be kind of like, a little stingy with like bathroom hall passes and things like that, because, I didn't, are they going to go play in the hallway, whatever. I had whatever. And I started to realize that I just have to I have to trust them right away that they really need to use the bathroom. They really have important business to take care of. And I should not assume that anything bad is going to happen until something bad happens. So, it affects all those little decisions that you make. And sometimes the kid just appreciates you because you're the teacher that will always let them go to the bathroom because they always have to go to the bathroom or whatever. And that matters. I mean, because we have a lot of rules that we kind of have in place as educators, and sometimes they're helpful and sometimes they're a little stifling for some of the kids as well. So
definitely. And, when you were talking about how easily people like teachers can say yes to everything when they shouldn't, it occurred to me that sometimes you need to say yes to yourself instead.
Ooh.
Sometimes it's not so much a no as it's, I would love to do that, but right now I need to say yes to my need to have a little bit of peace and quiet so my brain doesn't explode.
Yep. Amen. I agree wholeheartedly.
Because we do, we have this culture that says that we should do things for each other all the time, but that doesn't mean you should burn yourself out doing things for other people all the time. And some of us, ask me how I know, are more likely to do that than not do that. And so, yeah, you can say yes to adventures and new experiences, but don't forget to say yes to yourself too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days as an artist, or what you want to teach next, or?
Well, so every year I do like a theme in my classroom, and my theme this year, so in the past it's been like artists A through Z or art through the ages or art around the world or something like that. And in response to our year on the computer, we really had a year and a quarter that were totally on the computer. My school is one-to-one devices. And so it was a long time on the computer. And I really felt like we needed to, specifically in art, just have a year of kind of hands-on, physical, like we're going to use the computer as little as possible, kind of year. And so the theme is really just kind of enjoy the process. And so I'm just trying to kind of keep it strictly hands-on activities, and we're doing a lot of art exercises, but also just trying to sort of sample as many processes as we can and just kind of get back to that physical experience instead of the virtual experience. So that was definitely not something that I ever planned, but just was definitely the right choice for us this year. And as far as my personal art making, so there's two, I guess, little things that I'm doing right now personally. One is I teach an AP Studio art course, and the kids have to make a portfolio of 15 pieces based on a theme. They choose the theme, they choose the materials, but I always do it alongside them. So I'm just sort of in touch with how much I've asked them to do and if I should shift a deadline or whatever. And my theme the last 2 years, I kept the same theme for 2 years. I did cages, and I still like that theme, but I had kind of I need to take a break from it. I'm not saying I'll never come back to it, but it's but I had kind of run out of ideas. I think I'd done 2 years of that, and that one was a very I did a lot of kind of, well, I don't want to say photorealistic work, but I did images of prisons. I did animal cages. I did like fish bowls. I did nets in the ocean. I took kind of I did people, people that had been in prison, had a pretty loose interpretation of all the different types of cages, even just fences, horses behind fences and things like that. And it was a lot of kind of just realistic or even just slightly abstracted drawing. And I'm someone, you can tell by my wall, that loves just pure non-objective playing with color and shape. There is no deeper meaning behind any of this. But I really do like to just kind of play with color and shape just for art's sake. And this was a good year for me to decide to do that. So I have a portfolio, and when the kids make one piece, I tend to sometimes I tend to make 2 or 3. Just because I'm in the art classroom all day, I have a little more time to dedicate to them. And I'm always wanting to show them more ways that they can do something. So I've done a series that was kind of just art with circles, another one that's just with triangles. It's very just back to the basics and the pure pleasure of art for art's sake. And I always do like to, after I've done like a particularly kind of heady series, like to just do something that doesn't require a lot of intellectual thought, that feels like an escape, feels brainless, feels fun. And that's definitely what my series will be. Although I do tend to somehow overthink. I overthink lines and circles and triangles and the colors that I somehow I've managed to do that too. But that's what I'm doing personally. And then and kind of just also to come back to our yes, and the band director had asked us to paint their panels for the marching band halftime show. So we're doing some very large Bruno Mars panels. The kids, I did some pencil lines. The kids painted layers. I've painted layers. It's kind of a collaboration. So that's some stuff I'm doing. And then another thing is the community has asked us to do. We're painting storm drains with environmental messages. I also have a environmental club known as Tree Huggers, responsible for the earth and environment, also tree. And it's one of my favorite things that one of my students came up with the idea, and I've been loving it ever since. We formed it just before the pandemic. But we paint storm drains locally that have environmental messages that kind of show people that litter shouldn't go down the storm drains because it just goes straight into our water sources. And so we've done 5, and there's 12 more that we could potentially do over the next couple of years. And so we have a couple little kind of projects like that. We do some holiday window painting and things like that. So we have a few kind of community beautification processes, a little bit of brainless fun stuff for me. And then I think I'm just focusing on new art making experiences with the students. So I think I'm usually dabbling in a few different things at the same time. It sort of suits my ADHD art interests to start one little project over here, another one over here, and then eventually I'm mad at myself for not finishing the project from several months ago, and I get enough energy to finish that one. something like that.
I think that's pretty common. That's not an unusual situation to be in at all. And just for people who are listening, I want to say that Tara's wall is a festival of random shapes and colors, and it's really cool. There's a star and an asterisk and something that really looks like it should be a zebra tail, and it's just fun. So
I'm going to call that the zebra tail from now on. I like that.
That's what it makes me think of anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, so when she talks about the wall, that's what's on it. Since you guys can't see it. But yeah, well, it sounds like you keep plenty busy.
Yep. I'm a busybody. I think that I like to be pretty busy most of the time, and then I do eventually kind of break and have to just do nothing for a little bit. But in general, I think I am one of those people that loves what they do. So if you love what you do, you don't work another day in your life in a way. I think being an art teacher is fun. I think working with kids is so fun and rewarding, and I have a lot of reasons to get up and go and start projects and finish projects. And so I am generally a little happier, busier. I don't know that I am the kind of person that could actually handle retirement. I think I could handle it for a few months, and then I'd be like, I'm just going to substitute teach a little. I can just see me doing something like that. I don't sit still very long. I think a little bit of activity is actually my happy place. So, but sometimes that annoys other people.
It's a really good problem to have.
Yes.
If it's even a problem at all. Well, it has been so fantastic to hear your story and all of the things that you're working on and how you've applied yes and to art and all of the rest of it. And I'm so grateful to you for coming and talking with me today.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love that you're supporting creative people, and I think it's great for us to share our ideas. Keeps us all going and get through those challenging moments when we have very little energy for the yes and.
That's our show for this week. Thanks again to Tara Thieleke for coming to talk with me, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please do leave a review and share it with a friend. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.